authorized this transaction, set it in motion, worked with Sanchez, and told Sanchez to implement it. He is responsible, in my opinion, as the mayor, for everything. He should be paying the bill. What he's doing is hiding behind Mr. Sanchez so he doesn't have to pay, and Mr. Sanchez will pay. Mr. Sanchez is paying, I believe, that's only my belief, in the hopes the mayor will recognize this in the future, that he paid $3,000. That's what I believe to be the case. That's my conclusion. And I believe he is, the mayor is hiding behind Mr. Sanchez and should pay the $3,000. I also believe he was sloppy and negligent in authorizing it in the first place, and wrong, because Corporation Counsel said it was an inappropriate transaction. Thirdly, we have emails that appear that the mayor, I'm trying to think of the large word for fibbing, prevaricating, when Sandy sent me an email that she had approached the mayor at my suggestion to ask him if he gave his opinion to somebody in the office, his office, to send to the Hartford Courier. She wrote me an email back saying that I talked to the mayor, and the exact quote was he gave the email, the report, to nobody. A day later, Maribel Laluz, who's his communications officer, who works in the mayor's office, submitted to Craig that she's the one that leaked the report to the Hartford Courier. So then I wrote Sandy an email back saying, it looks like you were lied to by the mayor, and that caused you to mislead me in your email to me saying that he didn't do a thing. And then there's been a recent email from Maribel to Craig, because Craig asked her who gave it to her.
Phone conversation, on the phone.
On the phone, and she said it was Juan Figueroa, who was the chief of staff, and Sandy gave her the report to leak to the press. But what it really means to me, no matter which one in the merry-go-round you have, it's all part of the mayor's staff. He's responsible for his staff. That staff leaked this report, which submarined and compromised an investigation, his investigation, and it was wrong, and I want to talk to Attorney Taylor about next steps, because I don't think we should ever see this as normal practice, particularly if we're going to do some honest investigations in the future. We certainly do not want to have this to happen in the future. That's my comment.
How did this compromise?
That question is coming. Like I said before, if I would have asked the same questions as Sandy asked, based on her response, based on her opinion and all the narrative in there, I would ask the same questions. And the thing is that I would be in a better position asking the questions to read the mayor's responses. So if I ask him a direct question, and I read his body language and how he's answering me through my through certain techniques and all the training I've had with questioning people and reading body language, I can tell if he's lying or not, or think he's lying or telling the truth or being sincere. I lost all that. That's gone now, because now if I ask him all the same questions, he's got a script. So I didn't have that. Whenever, and you know this as a lawyer, whenever you're asking somebody, especially in investigations, this was an audit, you want that element of surprise. You walk into their office, you start asking questions. There's no preparation, and they got to give you the answers.
And I had questions.
I lost that, but did that affect the outcome? I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know. Would it have? Would the mayor have given me different answers? I don't know.
But having once asked for an opinion, you can't give a legal opinion without knowing the facts.
That's
so
true.
It's almost like a catch-22. Who's going to develop the facts here? And it's really like there are two investigations going on. And it wouldn't surprise me. Go ahead.
Sandy knew this was a payment to a funeral home for the daughter of an employee that was murdered, that lived in Manchester. She knew, that was factual,
Mhm.
so. I don't think she had to talk to the mayor to ask him if that was okay to pay. Either it's black, I thought it might be a little gray, but she came out and said, this is black and white, this should not have been done. She didn't have to get that from the mayor, because the mayor doesn't know. If he knew it was not appropriate, he would have said, I can't do this, it's illegal. The second one was a violation of the P card. I knew it was a violation of the P card, but I wanted it in writing from her. She didn't have to ask the mayor about the P card. All she had to do is look at it, look at the policy, which she did, and she quoted me from it. And the third one really didn't matter too much, so. And that's the way I saw it.
And-
She actually didn't have to talk to him.
Right, and I had further questions. I was going to ask Craig to interview again Mr. Sanchez to find out why he chose Maritza and Leanne Rawls too, about the method of payment, once we got the material from Sandy, which we lost the opportunity to do.
You can speculate all day long why they did that, but
I think what it is, my opinion, as soon as you sent those 3 questions to Sandy, within 15 minutes, they were already over at the mayor's office, and they were concocting a release and the story so that it made its way a few hours later to the Hartford Current online article at 5 o'clock, catching us all by surprise. And that's what happened.
that was done
And that's
the
clear.
day it was,
Right, and that's
was
clear to
issued.
me. So we can't
which
use
was
that
2
office.
weeks later.
We can't use that office anymore and feel good about it. Anyway, anybody
I
else?
can't
Any
draw
questions?
it proves that there's unauthorized spending. Disciplinary actions will be taken, including personal reimbursement or, in severe circumstances, termination. It's exactly what the mayor said,
And you meant
April 11th.
You meant 2013.
2013, while we were doing the P card audit with the infamous New Year's Eve dinner,
Caviar.
caviar dinner.
Summary, we did a procurement card audit. We're largely through with the test results. Everything looked good, except for this one transaction that popped out. I think everybody's well aware of it, a $3,000 transaction. We were requesting, we felt we were pretty confident that it wasn't a proper payment. We requested the opinion from the Corporation Counsel's office. They concurred. There was a number of back and forth, and the ultimate resolution at this point is that one of the individuals involved in the transaction has agreed to reimburse the city for that dollar amount. So I just wanted to bring that to you. The related report is largely done, and I think that we're close to being issuing that report. Again, with the exception of this item, everything's fine. So again, just wanted to bring everybody up to date on that and see. It's not the chief operating officer's card.
His assistant.
It's the chief operating, but yeah, it's the
Right.
chief, the minutes are correct. It's the chief operating office's procurement card.
Right. Which is in the name of
The
the
assistant.
CO's assistant, Ritza Braithwaite.
So anyways, just determine if there's anything else anybody had, questions or issues with that. It's been, out there, so.
Questions? I have one. Yes, sir. Yes, Councilman.
After you.
Okay. I have an observation. The matter was in the press. Craig was investigating this. We've asked Sandy, Craig asked Sandy for an opinion on 3 questions, I believe. And that email went to only Sandy, and carbon copy Pat. And somehow Sandy routinely notified the mayor and Mr. Ill. Sandy knew or saw Craig's email and supporting evidence, and one of the evidences was an email from Mr. Sanchez to Maritza instructing her to pay by P-card, and here's the relevant codes, pursuant to the authority of the mayor, which was the keywords. So Sandy knew when she sent the email to Pedro that Pedro was the subject of the investigation. Somehow, and it wasn't divine intervention, the email to Pedro made its way to the Hartford Courant, to where you all saw the article, I assume Saturday morning, which cut off our investigation and compromised Craig's investigation. There's been some subsequent back and forth in which Maribel Alous admitted to Craig that she sent Sandy's report to the Hartford Courant reporter. But the email from Sandy to the mayor was the direct one, so it would have been resting in the mayor's computer. How Maribel got that, I didn't know, and I asked Craig, and Craig didn't know, to go back to Maribel to ask her how she got that email, since she didn't get it originally from Sandy.
Which was the opinion,
Right,
which was the Word document.
right. And Maribel told Craig late this afternoon that Juan Figueroa and Sandy gave it to her.
Correct.
Correct?
Yep.
So there's a new issue here, whether or not a legitimate ongoing investigation has been compromised, and if so, what does that mean? And what does it mean when somebody at the city sends out material to the very target of the investigation? From my standpoint, it's going to make me pause to use court counsel again. You know, we had a very hard-fought change to where we could use outside counsel, and maybe we should use Mr. Taylor more for some of these things, because I don't like how this went down. It seems to me, Craig sent an email only to Sandy with a carbon copy to Pat, I believe, and you normally would expect her to write something to him and not have it bandied about, particularly to the people being investigated and elsewhere, so that it arrives in the press without our knowledge and catches us by surprise. It just is not a reasonable and responsible way to act. So it leads me to believe to use them less and maybe Mr. Taylor more. Having said that, I also believe that we should meet with Mr. Taylor, explain the facts that we know, and get some idea of next steps and what our options are. Whether it's a council fix, whether we have to send the material to the authorities or not, what our next steps are, and see what he presents to us by way of alternatives. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Peter. I wonder if this question shouldn't be raised. It seems generous of one member of the administration, namely Mr. Sanchez, to offer to pay the $3,000, if I have it correct, from the newspaper account. But the question is,
That's correct.
should the Ethics Commission or this commission look into any possible stimulus, written or unwritten, for Mr. Sanchez to take that improperly paid bill, which apparently from the account was not on his own initiation?
Right.
I mean, it may have been, it's unclear, at least to me and maybe to us, who initiated the idea, but does his willingness to pay that fee end the matter right there? Because do we know, or should ethics or someone else investigate if anything prompted his payment of it rather than anyone else above him in the chain of command? Is that a reasonable question?
Yeah, I think you raise a good point, and if the body agrees, Ted and Kyle, that'll be one of the things that we'll be asking Mr. Taylor.
I can answer that.
Yes.
When this transaction came up in the audit, or auditor came to me, I have a transaction note for on audit. We looked at the transaction, and then everything fell out from there. The support in Munis was an email from Sanchez to Maritza. Pay this, like Bruce said, pay it, authorized by the mayor, blah, blah, blah. The other piece of documentation supporting the payment in Munis was just a little cash register receipt for $3,000 from Carmen Funeral Home, which is not adequate support. I got on the phone and called Mr. Sanchez, and numerous calls, finally got back to me. I said, let's talk about this $3,000 payment to Carmen Funeral Home and your email to Maritza. The first thing he said to me was, I take full responsibility for this. I initiated it, and if you want me to go to the bank and get $3,000, I will. I said, I don't think that's necessary, but let's talk about it. And the way it went down is, everybody knows Kenny Blue. His daughter was murdered. And he said that Kenny didn't have the means to pay for it, very distraught, and he thought it would be a good Samaritan thing for the mayor to do. And he told me that he approached the mayor and asked the mayor for $5,000. The mayor said no initially. He says this sets a precedent, we shouldn't be doing this. And then I said, well, he obviously caved in. He said, yeah, he caved in, and he said 3,000. So then he went on his merry way and initiated the transaction through the P card. And the way I understand it through the opinion that I got is that the controller suggested the $3,000. I said, well, I asked Sanchez, why didn't this go through accounts payable? We set up the vendor, we get the support, and run through accounts payable with a check. He said, well, the funeral company, the funeral home wanted their money immediately. And the controller suggested we use the P card to pay for it, so it's just a...
Well, if I can cut to the chase though, if there was a discussion between the mayor, who is a supervisor of Mr. Sanchez, the question that I don't mind asking in public, why didn't the mayor pay it himself?
What the mayor said, and just said, I think it's in the opinion, or in an email, that he told Mr. Sanchez, if you can identify the funds, then pay it. If you can identify the funds, in quotes. I read it as, if I can do this, we have the funds, go ahead and do it. Well, Sanchez went ahead and done it. Did he identify the funds? It's in a contingency account for emergencies.
Well, through you, if I can ask court counsel, is that legal?
Well,
It's not in the city council budget, is it?
No.
Is it legal for him to authorize expenditure for that purpose?
I would have to look at the charter and the applicable.
no, well, I got the opinion on
Yeah.
it. She said it was totally wrong and inappropriate, and it wasn't allowed. It could not be done. It was not a valid expense for the city, and the
right.
mayor had no authority to do it.
And the mayor authorized it, so is it not he that
The
should?
opinion, obviously, you haven't seen the opinion yet. When I issue the report, which will be later this afternoon or tomorrow morning, I have in the audit report the whole opinion. And it's in italics, and you'll be able to read exactly what it
Well,
said.
the pertinent.
Which is all of
Yeah,
it, because it's all pertinent. And it really explains a lot of the things that she did, and how she questioned the mayor, and what he said, and everything else. It's all documented in there. So,
So
You,
but,
So it's not, yeah, I'm sorry.
So he
It's a matter-
initiated the
It's a matter of
transaction.
reimbursement to the city for paying this bill,
right.
and who pays and who initiated, in effect, that Mr. Sanchez would pay, rather than the mayor himself as the top administrator. Am I
He did.
understanding it?
Mr. Sanchez volunteered to do it.
Well, I understand there are ways of volunteering and other ways of volunteering. Okay.
Right. But he volunteered to me before anybody even knew about it. Before anybody knew about this, us questioning this transaction, and it even came up in an audit. This was all done prior to that. I mean, the first thing out of his mouth was, I don't want this to taint the administration or any of that. or anybody else, I take responsibility for doing it, and initiating it.
Seth, you have a question or observation?
Actually, more both. Question doesn't have to be answered, but I'm hoping that your report will outline and explain the P-card procedures. I assume they are different from the normal procedures for approving an expenditure, or are they not? In other words, we went through all this before with the
they
treasurer's
both-
payment to,
well,
on
they-
insurance.
The treasurer was a wire transfer. Right.
But there is a process for approving of payments, and so is the
Mhm.
process
The
different?
P-card
for
payment
P-card?
process goes through what they call
Workflow.
the workflow.
Workflow.
So level
approval
10,
process.
level 20, level 30. So the P-card, when it's pulled out of Works out of the Bank of America system and put into Munis, it's sitting there. Someone has to go in there and code it and let it go. Then there's 3 levels of approval, 10, 20s, and 30. The levels of approval on this transaction were Leanne, the finance director, and Ray Singh, I think, was on it also, which is an accounting and control. The same type workflow goes through accounts payable, whether it's a check or a P-card, it's the same type of workflow.
Question.
It's the same thing.
So the question is, number one, were the procedures followed?
They were,
Yeah.
because it
Okay,
was the
and I
internal.
think
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think that's important. The question that you asked the opinion about, was this a legal expenditure?
Yes, exactly.
And we got the answer.
It was
to that.
number
It says
one.
it's
The
no.
first question was, where does it, I asked him, where does it say or show that the mayor has the authority to make this type of payment?
Right.
Number one, within the charter or
Or
municipal
anyone.
code. Right. I said the mayor. And the second one was this a violation of the P-card policy? And third, should it have gone to city council for an appropriation, a special appropriation? And those 3 things.
I would assume.
And the first one was totally inappropriate, not allowed, should never, not be done.
So that sort of
2,
mitigates the whole.
clear
concept.
violation of the P-card policy, clear violation for business expenses only. This is number 1 is not allowed,
So
obviously. number
it
2.
it violated the purpose.
Of
For
the P-card.
business purposes, for
Business
city
purpose.
business
Right.
purposes only.
But there are
approval
2 issues
process.
there. I mean,
Right.
the other is the process for a payment. And you're saying that it went through the right process for a payment. In other words, the different approvals for the payment were given. It's
Right.
just that the purpose of the payment was illegal
That's
because it
right.
wasn't a public purpose.
That's right.
And I assume that going through the purposes being, the procedure being correct, is that somehow that was charged, had to be charged to an existing appropriation.
Yes, exactly.
And
And I put what that exactly was in the audit report and said this was an inappropriate use of that general ledger account.
Okay.
And the opinion also addresses the fact that it was approved, but everybody that approved it was sort of in on it, they were all sort of involved in it. And, you know, Leanne, I mean, she was aware of it, so it came through, she approved it. The finance director, or the acting finance director, I think at that point in time, it gets to him after everything else. I don't know how much he knew about it, but by the time it gets to him, it's more of a cursory review
But I
more than
think-
anything else.
I hope your
Yeah.
report will make
Oh, yeah.
it clear, just, I mean, this basically, as I understand what you're saying, was the expenditure of funds for something that is not permitted, even if there'd been an appropriation for it,
Mhm.
even if the council had approved it. It was a use of funds for something that is not a public purpose.
It's clearly states that in the opinion,
Right.
and
If you
that's
do
included
it,
in
then
the
you,
report.
by definition, you have no general ledger account to charge it to.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what's,
Well,
correct.
if it's a contingency account, that doesn't, I don't know how the contingency account is set up, but that doesn't say what it's.
There's a $100,000
But
limit
it's-
for emergencies and unforeseen events.
But it's business,
That's
it's city.
the definition.
But it's
Is it an
again,
emergency?
If this was-
Not the city's
city
emergency.
business only.
If
Is
this
it
was,
unforeseen?
if
This
this
is
was
for-
proper, the
This is
carbon
Tornado
funeral,
hitting the city hall or something.
if this was proper, the carbon funeral home would have been an approved vendor.
The difference between a P card and accounts payable is, P card is approved after the money goes out the door. Accounts payable, it's approved before the money goes out the door. So the money's already gone, then it's approved on the back end.
Yeah.
So
What
you can't
this,
stop the payment, it's already done.
what this,
Same approvers. If it went through accounts payable, now you have to say Carmen Funeral Home up
Pay
as
it
a
back.
vendor. Then you have to get the papers on why we set them up as a vendor, somebody has to set them up.
and the council has to prove it.
No,
Not
not
the
for setting
event,
up
not
a
the
vendor.
establishment of a vendor.
And then they make the payment on the vendor.
So is there a process and procedure on P-card use? I mean, if it's a payment to somebody who isn't an approved vendor?
Oh, that happens all, it doesn't have to be an approved vendor on a P card.
Yeah, it's not.
The
it's-
definition
you
is
could
it
use
has
it-
to be
you
a
could use a P-
valid business expense.
Right. You can go to.
So if
get
I
lunch.
go to a conference down in Philadelphia and I make a payment to Best Western Hotel, that's not an approved vendor, it's not a vendor file, but it's a good payment.
Because he's approved.
And there are also some restrictions on the P cards. In
Oh, there's
both-
all the MCC
Yeah,
regs.
MCC codes,
Now.
both commodity codes and MCC codes, that sort of restrict what you can, like you can't, no liquor stores, no casinos are on there.
No funeral homes. The
no
funeral
funeral.
home MCC code is blocked for every card.
Councilman?
It shows it as blocked on Maritz's card, the one I got a few days ago. So that tells me it was blocked and somebody had to unblock it.
Why was she chosen?
There's no answer for that,
But-
why it went
but the
on
point-
Maritz's card.
But the point then is that not all the procedures were followed. In other words,
Well,
use
if you
of-
can demonstrate that you have a payment to be made, so they unblock it. So my card's blocked for hotels. When I'm going on a conference, I gotta pay the hotel, so I have to have that unblocked to make that payment.
unblocked
And then they'll
who
block
un-
it again.
Who unblocks it?
It's either Leanne or Amy.
Probably
Well,
Amy.
the point is that there's a process that has
Oh,
to
yeah,
be done. in
there's
the-
definitely a process.
Councilman, you
And
have a
if I have to
question?
make an expenditure over my limit, they will unblock that limit to make that expenditure and come back. There's a whole process in place, and it's very, very, very clear, the P-card policy, which was all rewritten after our audit and all updated. And it's really very specific.
So the
But they
procedure was.
believed.
Because it went through the standard procedure approval process, it's just that they had all had this idea that,
That it was a good payment.
They were all in on it.
Funeral
Well-
homes is blocked.
Right.
Why is funeral
The
homes
only,
even on the list?
the only department that funeral homes are used by is Health and Human Services.
That's why.
They occasionally have to
Okay.
bury someone.
Okay.
Councilman?
I may be missing some, but is there not a fourth question, which is coming to this final step of the restitution, the offering of the 3,000 in payment? I mean, I'm sitting here wondering, supposing a company, let's say the channel, Lens Channel, had a certain policy, or a lawyer worked a certain office, and he or she said, well, it was my mistake, I'll pay it, but in fact, might they have been induced or even coerced into making the payment, saying that you take care of it and take the responsibility? In other words, does there need to be an investigation by ethics or counsel as to whether that payment by that department was not fully voluntary in relationship to
Wow.
a supervisor?
Wow.
In other words, maybe I'm using vague language.
no,
but-
I understand what you're saying, but that's
Mr.
typically something that's very difficult to come to the bottom of and conclude one way or the other. I mean, you can certainly interview
Mr.
everybody and,
Or do an
Further.
FOI, I mean, if, it's unlikely it would be an email, I imagine, if someone did an FOI to see if there was any suggestion, take care of it, but it might have been a verbal exchange, but does that not need to be considered in the whole thing?
Councilman on the news report from Channel 3,
Yeah,
up top he said that he was gonna pay it,
I understand.
3,000.
Yeah.
On the bottom he said, I don't think I should pay the whole thing.
I missed
He
it.
said that on Channel 3.
Well, has it been a
Go back
while?
and reread it.
I missed it.
Right. Now, and then Mirabel says, when they asked if the mayor was gonna pay any of it, she said no, no, and no. She said it 3 times to the reporter. 3 times she said it. Go back and look at it.
Councilman-
We were just laughing like you didn't hear it the first time. She said, no, no, and no.
So
Councilman,
There's no question the mayor's paying it
There's a
for it.
number of ways you could try to go about that. What you're looking for would be, you have to, perhaps go through the emails and look for some sort of email documentation to support that there was some sort of coercion or, suggestion that he be fully responsible for that. Or interview all the parties and hope that one of those individuals, if it was in fact the case, voluntarily agrees to admit that it was the case, and then it has to be corroborated by a number of people, I would think. So, I mean, that would be the process that you'd have to probably go through.
So my last question, would that be through a prosecutor or corp counsel or the ethics commission or some other authority?
you could do it yourself. Your council has subpoena power.
Yes.
You should do it yourself, not us. We don't have subpoena power. Corp counsel has been an actor in this, so they shouldn't be used. But you yourselves, after the budget process, I see no reason why you all can't do it. You have subpoena power, and it might be something worthwhile to look at, and it wouldn't take too long. So my suggestion is it'd be a council investigation. We will look at the second part to this, which is the leak, and meet with Attorney Taylor to see what the next steps might be with respect to the leak, because I'm still not satisfied when a legal investigation has been compromised by the actions of staff in the mayor's office. I'm not happy, I'm not thrilled, and I want to get to the bottom of it, and I want to get some sage advice from Attorney Taylor about what our possible next steps might be, which we can bring back to the table for the next meeting.
Larry, April 11th, 2000.